I'm reviewing the Punch newspaper. I have the New Telegraph newspaper and, of course, the Independent newspaper.
Of course, over here I have the Guardian, the Authority, the Nation, the Nigerian Tribune, and of course Daily Trust.
Before we go on with the newspaper review, we do have a political analyst, of course, social commentator right here with us in the studio in person of Yemi Daniels. He will be reviewing some of these political issues within the front lines of these newspapers. Good morning, Yemi.
Yeah, good morning. Good to be here again.
Okay. Now we're starting off with the Punch newspaper. The screaming headlines of the Punch says INEC office deserted as Rivers APC demands poll cancellation. That's on page 2. PDP 6 Amechi Peter Sites arrest trial. That's on page 2 as well. Core members killed during election violence. That's coming from NYC on page 2. Fresh crisis looms as Sheriff ignores PDP next directive. That's the National Executive Council of the PDP. That's on page 8 of the Punch. NNPC owes Federation accounts 4.9 trillion naira. That's coming from RMAFC. That's on page 29. Rapists strangle UTME candidates, dump corpse inside bush. That's on page 4 and 5 of the Punch newspaper. Other stories on the Punch. Buhari says power crisis no longer a laughing matter. Targets 10,000 megawatts. That's on page 2 of the Punch. Essay. Oruru Yunusa gets 3 million naira bail. That's coming from page 7 of the Punch newspaper. Singer, no more lost dies. That's on page 38 of the Punch. Fire raises 100 buildings, kills 2 in Lagos. That's on page 5 of the Punch newspaper.
Well,
several headlines here. I don't even know which to start with because they're all very important. But Rivers State seems to be making front headlines on virtually all the papers. So let's talk about INEC office deserted as Rivers APC demands poll cancellation on page 2. PDP 6 Amechi Peter Sites arrest. It seems like the fight is between Amechi and Nyesom Wike. Because to a reasonable extent, I'd already forgotten about Dakuki Peter's side in the equation. I mean, he's now DG of Nimasa.
So what is he looking for?
Yes.
But Yemi, how do you see what is happening really with the Rivers State?
The most recent developments.
Well, the Rivers issue did not start today. It actually started in the last administration, where the tripod fight was between the former First Lady, Nyesom Wike, and of course, Rotimi Amechi. So it's been like that for a while now. And the Rivers State election was more or less a litmus test for who actually controls the political machinery of Rivers State. But having said that, I believe election is supposed to be a festival of democracy and not a theater of wars. And if you knew your onions, of course, you just allow the entire process take its course and not necessarily subvert the process. But unfortunately, because the political elites would not just want Nigeria to do things rightly, they would just do their own thing every time and all the time. Unfortunately, it's bad that in 2016, that Nigeria were having such a terrible situation in Rivers State. And another thing I looked at again, I want to blame INEC a little bit, and this is the reason. If you look at the elections that the INEC has conducted after Professor Jega, none of them have been conclusive. They've always been crisis. The question is this: there is something called HACCP, Hazard Analysis of Critical Control Points. Did INEC do any of such things so as to forestall all of these things? We always knew that Rivers is a situation, is a flashpoint. And all INEC needed to do was to guard against all manner of suspicion, because it's suspicion that triggers crisis. Remember that when in some parts of the Rivers State, they got to the polling units, and agents realized that some ballot papers seemed to be fake. Some had a coat of arms on them, and others did not have the coat of arms on them. So that gave room for some kind of suspicion, and they started making calls and saying, what's going on here? And that there's a suspicion that there's some fraud somewhere, that all of those things were cases.
But I think basically political analysts have also argued that the Buhari administration, looking at how volatile election is in Rivers State, the president should have saw this coming and make sure that in terms of security, the unforeseen circumstances is taken care of. But the argument is it because the APC wanted a situation where they could manipulate the election, in favor of the party. because from the results, PDP is leading. They've just we've just suspended 8 local government elections. But what do you foresee? Do you foresee INEC releasing those results?
Now, I want to say this. I may not agree totally that they wanted to rig the elections in favor of the APC. You recall that during the Ekiti elections, and Goodluck Jonathan, the former president, deployed soldiers in Ekiti. APP, they said it was not proper. Now, it will not be right if the same party that said it was not proper for the government to have deployed soldiers at the time, if they went ahead to deploy soldiers this time around, they would have said, oh, now we knew what you were talking about. And don't also forget there's an issue on ground where some soldiers were being investigated over their participation in the election issues in Ekiti. So to that extent, I think the president was trying to be careful. But however, the president, I think the president should have understood that we're not as civilized as he's thinking, especially when it comes to politics. We're not as civilized.
Okay, we'll just show you some clips, okay? I think it's important.
Yes, it's
I'll just show you just a little clip of what happened in River State. If our director is ready, if that visual is ready, we'd like to take it now. If it's not, we'll just continue. Okay, this is just what happened. Of course, quite a number of people have seen this on the news bulletin. But let us just have a clip just to spice what we are talking about this morning, if our director is ready. Okay, we're sure that visual is not ready. We will take it before the end of this segment. Okay, quickly now, we'll take you to The Guardian. This is coming from The Guardian. Government in dilemma over power sector targets 10,000 megawatts. And Buhari promises 2,000 megawatts this year. Generation drops to 2,695 megawatts. And President wants APC states to build 250,000 housing units yearly. And still on the front page of The Guardian, observers fold Rivers rerun polls. With 3 riders, INEC suspends action, begins staff audit. And NYC confirms death of core member. Okay, you can also get more stories on page 56 and 43. The problem with Code of Conduct Bureau by Omabweze, and change going to happen in Cuba, says Obama. And of course, in page 3, anxiety over HIV patients as U.S. reduces support. And troops kill Boko Haram leader, 18 members rescue 67 hostages. You could see that front page picture there. The Vice President, Doma, and Buhari are the 2-day economic summit. That's all on the front page of The Guardian. Your friend.
Taking the New Telegraph newspaper, there are several headlines on the New Telegraph. Sincere apologies for the break. We're back now. We're taking the New Telegraph newspaper. The screaming headlines on the New Telegraph newspaper says, fresh crisis brews in PDP over Sharif. NWC lobbies for extension of tenure. That's on page 2 of the New Telegraph newspaper. Other stories, Buhari, we are in dilemma over power privatization. That's on page 2. The writer says, federal government targets 10,000 megawatts in 3 years. directs states to build 250,000 houses annually. That's on page 2. Other stories, APC to INEC, cancel Rivers rerun polls. NYC confirms death of core members. PDP kicks. That's on page 5. Sound waves may treat prostate cancer. That's coming from a study on page 6 of the New Telegraph newspaper. Yemi Daniels, there's a 2-day retreat going on in the presidential villa, and the president is concentrating on housing, on power, on agriculture, and of course on manufacturing. But specifically, he was talking about the privatization of power. That, you know, it's public interest clashing private privatization. For you, what are your comments? Because he was seriously lamenting on the power sector, although he thinks that we can generate 100,000 megawatts before 2019. That's his thought, but he's very sad about the power sector.
Is it feasible?
Does it mean that the privatization of power to an extent was, you know, to no avail?
You recall that the privatization was the federal administration was twisted by the powers that be. Recall very vividly that when the privatization bill was, when the power reform roadmap was conceived. Now some people were not comfortable with the process, and that was why they had to push for the sack of Batenaji. Now, because Batenaji understood the value, she understood the sector very well, and Batenaji was willing to do it the way it should be done. Remember that power is a capital-intensive sector. Now, what happens in that sector is that a lot of money must go there before you start cashing recouping your investment. Eventually, we sold to politicians who did not have the capital to invest. Now, what we have in our hands now is that they're using our money to invest in the system. Do you understand? So that's the situation we found ourselves. As we speak, I think that sector needs about not less than about 18 trillion.
So to set it back.
To get to where we're going to. Now, these people do not have that money. Now, because they are politicians, institutional investors cannot trust them because they are not professionals. Coupled with the fact that there are policy somersaults here and there. So it's a potpourri of issues in that sector. And my expectation initially was this, that when this administration came on board, that there would be some kind of restructuring the ownership system.
Are you subscribing to bringing back a national power institution like NEPA?
No, far from it. Now, the whole idea, there were agreements that were signed, and that there were aspects of that agreement that give government advantage over the private owners now. So, but you see, even at that, the bulk of the challenge that we money is capital. For that sector, is capital. It's capital, basically.
Okay, it's a 2-day economic summit, and of course, it's going to be wrapping up on Zoom today. Okay. All right, we'll take you to the authority right away. And APC governors, others move against Odigie Oyegun. With 2 riders, defunct ACN drafts Akonde into BOT race, and Tony Momo leads ex-CPC bloc to regain power party. And of course, if you look at page 4, why we suspended Rivers rerun election by INEC. And Ifesinachi Igbo monarchs, PFN activists want Emir accomplices arrested. That also you can get on page 4. And looking at the world of sports, Nigeria versus Egypt clash, Eagles storm Kaduna today. You can get that on page 45. And Kanu's wife is telling us that my husband's arrest has popularized Biafra agitation. Very interesting. Yemi Daniels, we seem to be experiencing a crack within the walls of the APC. The governors, of course, are moving against the chairman of the party, and of course, the defunct ACN, that's the Tinubu camp. Of course, they're pushing forward Akonde for the BOT race. Tony Momo is leading the ex-CPC bloc. Do you see APC surviving before 2019?
Well, it's natural it's natural in any human system for there to be conflicts here and there. And don't forget that politics is a game of control. So everybody is trying to outwit the other, every system or every bloc is trying to outwit the other bloc for control of the party. Now, APC will survive to the extent they are able to manage these issues. Don't forget that PDP had similar cases even while they were in government. But they always knew how to settle their scores and deal with their issues. It is now left for the ruling party to prove to Nigerians that they deserve to be in power with the way they manage their internal dynamics.
Okay, moving on now to the Independent newspaper. The screaming headlines on the Independent newspaper says corruption could cost Nigeria 79 trillion naira in GDP losses by 2030. That's on the Independent newspaper. Other stories: federal government targets 10,000 megawatts in 3 years. That's on page 2. That's before 2019. Other stories on the Independent newspaper: CBN governor faces test as opposition swells over naira. That's on page 4 of the Independent newspaper. How technology will shape retail banking. That's an editorial on page 5 of the Independent newspaper. PIB will be laid before NAS next week. That's coming from the Senate President, Dr. Abubakar Bukola Saraki. That's on page 3 of the Independent newspaper. Lagos Assembly tasked Buhari on naira value. That's on page 5. Unemployment increases by 2 million naira. That's coming from the NBS, and that's on page 7. I'll quickly talk about the PIB will be laid before the National Assembly next week, coming from the Senate President. There's been so much of dragging, controversies back and forth. Initially, when they said the budget was supposed to have been released, that was like last week. We were disappointed that the budget wasn't released, but now they're saying, okay, next week. Should Nigerians be expectant, or should we just lay low and allow them to do whatever they're supposed to do? Whenever the budget is released, we get to see it instead of raising our expectations high, and at the end of the day, it's dashed.
Well, I think the National Assembly is playing a PR game here. And
how do you mean PR game?
No, the issue is that this is why I say it's PR. Now, last week, they did say that by today, the budget will be passed. By Thursday last week, there were certain preliminary process that should have taken place on Thursday that will tell us that by Tuesday, the budget will be passed. Those preliminary processes did not hold. Now that tells us something, that the possibility of the budget being passed today is very, very, very
But that's saying next week. And on the other hand, the Senate President and some other senators were saying it's better late than never. They're trying as much as they can to forestall further occurrences of errors in the budget. So they are critically scrutinizing the papers.
That gives room for us to assume that there is some other things that is being considered as far as the budget is concerned. Don't forget that there is, in the rumors out there, the ordinary Nigeria is beginning to think that the CCT has a lot to do with the budget.
Of course, I was just going to say that political pundits are beginning to look at this critically. And the argument, just like what you said, is that Saraki is holding the federal government to ransom. He wants this issue of the CCT to clear up first, to know his fate before he makes the right move for this budget to be passed. But again, if two elephants are fighting, who suffers? So I think the Senate and, of course, the executive must find a common ground. I think the problem again is that some of the guys who are in APC, their flesh is in APC, but their soul and spirit is in PDP. Well, we just hope that they find a way out.
Well, and the circumstances.
Because a lot of people, foreign investors, were waiting for that budget.
The private sector is practically comatose because nobody knows the direction of the budget or the government.
But I'm just thinking aloud to myself. I mean, we're already the first part of the year. The first quarter of the year has already ended in April. Yeah. If the president is saying his major concentration is on housing, when you talk about housing, you're talking about roads. That's Fashola's ministry. We're gradually approaching the rainy season from next month to start raining. What major projects can we possibly achieve in the raining season when it comes to housing and infrastructure? I'm just thinking aloud.
Well, we just we hope the government will this economic summit something worthwhile will be done. Okay, quickly now, we're looking at the Nation newspaper. 7 ex-governors orders to lose loot kept in Dubai. Okay, Itazi Rider, EFCC chair, minister off to retrieve cash. They better get the money because we need it. Youth Corps member shot dead during Rivers rerun poll on page 6. Itazi Rider, another declared missing, found. Youths mourn a great loss. And opposition in Benin Republic wins the presidency on page 7. And of course, we also have about 4 top stories there. Sexual assault, Queen's College girls defend teacher on page 4. And National Assembly to bring back PIB next week on page 12. And of course, court grants essay suspected abductor Yunusa bail on page 43.
So it's about 3 million.
Of course. And of course, we'll quickly take a look at the Nigerian Tribune. But I think it's important we allow Mr. Yemidanos to look at 7 ex-governors, the loots kept in Dubai. We were told that the chairman of the EFCC and the minister, they're off to get the money. I hope they get the money complete.
Sometimes when I hear some things and I just laugh and just... Now you ask yourself, what's the process of retrieving such money? What's the quality? What is the bilateral relationship between Nigeria and the UAE to facilitate such transactions? Now don't also forget that. Now some of these monies are being used in this economy. You understand? Now you want me to just allow you to have the money back, the money I didn't ask for, that your guys brought into the system that we are taking advantage of. What will be the parameters? What will be the negotiation and what have you? So it has to do with what's the nature of the bilateral relationship Nigeria has with the UAE. Those are the things that will determine if such monies will be retrieved or not.
Well, I think the trips that have been made by the president tends to. These are some of the,
especially to Dubai.
Yes, these are some of the moves he's actually making. Talking to them, please.
Well, let's see how those things pan out, because at the end of the day, it boils down to real diplomatic issues.
Okay, just to let our director know, if that visual is ready from River State, just a clip, concerning what happened, at least for the benefit of those who were not in River State. Okay, but we'll take our final newspaper, the Tribune, before we can take that clip.
Yes, the last paper for review is the Nigerian Tribune. The screaming headlines on the Nigerian Tribune says, often core members killed in Rivers rerun. That's on page 2, really sad. Often core members killed in Rivers rerun, as INEC suspends further election matters to probe alleged fake results sheet. APC calls for total cancellation of exercise. INEC has no power to cancel declared results. That's coming from the governor of Rivers. We are not cancelling them. Talking about INEC. State of emergency won't work in Rivers State. That's coming from state of emergency won't work in Rivers and Ekiti State. That's coming from the governor of Ekiti, Ayodele Fayose. Other stories, the Southwest, the politics of LCDAS, you could find that on page 2 of the Nigerian Tribune. Declared results from Rivers State, what APC and PDP scored respectively, on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune. Get details. Buhari directs APC governors to build 250,000 housing units per year. That's on page 4 of the Nigerian Tribune. Says power solution no longer laughing matter. Targets additional 2,000 megawatts for 2016. Forex scarcity grips me, Buhari says. Lafia G, Java boys clash. 10 injured, 40 vehicles, 4 homes destroyed. That's on page 9 of the Nigerian Tribune. Buhari directs APC governors to build 250,000 housing units per year on page 4. I talked about the rainy seasons that are approaching, and the president is very particular about power and infrastructure. What can we possibly achieve between now and the second quarter of the year, which is the rainy season, if the budget still hasn't been released by the end of March as we speak?
The question is not even whether the budget is released or not. The governors have not been able to pay salaries. Can they build houses?
Why just only to APC governors? It should be
well. For whatever reasons the president had, but the bottom line is this: because the reality is different now. The best you can do for housing. By the way, Nigeria has a deficit of about 17 million housing units, and for you to do something meaningful, You need to create a robust framework that private sector will be able to do that job, not government. These are issues that I would rather that politicians think about and ask, why do we have to spill blood because of elections? And it brings me to one major thing that I always wanted to ask. What is happening to Center for Democratic Studies?
At least for
That's supposed to be boot camp for politicians. So that you train them. You don't need all of this. Now, an open copper. Just imagine how much money has been spent on that girl or that guy, and just
how many lives have been
just
waiting for him to graduate?
Yes, imagine, and now graduated, and
let's look at it from this other point of view, the viewpoint of the masses. To an extent, it's not spirits and angels who fight; it's the masses. It's we, the people who carry these guns and weapons. A case study is in Oyo State. The former governor, what's his name, Oyinlola, and the present governor. They were cats and dogs back in the days. People fought for both of them, but today they are best of friends. I could go on in Ekiti State and so many other states. In Rivers State, for instance, Amici and Wike could always come back together to settle. Later. What happens to the lives that have been lost? Don't you think we, the masses, it's that point we sit down and we think, because if we are not ready to fight for these people, to an extent, then too would sit down and rethink.
Possibly,
but we're always ready.
Yeah, we could also recommend that families must be duly compensated if they lost their loved ones, especially the hard work staff.
Who compensates them?
No, I'm just saying, I'm just proposing, because there could be some kind of insurance policy.
Mr. Benjamin, is it for families who voluntarily fought and in
the
process they lost their lives?
I'm talking of
for INEC officials.
INEC official, it's just like a policeman.
Okay. There should be an insurance policy.
There should be an insurance policy.
INEC should be able to come with an insurance policy.
Definitely. So that once staff or whatever, life insurance policy.
But Benjamin Peters, if you're looking at the entire scenario in Rivers, Amechi is in the federal level, federal might. Takuku Peters had is in the federal level as well. One of Amechi's commissioners too, I don't know what portfolio he was given, he's also in the federal level. So to an extent, there's federal presence in Rivers State. Do you see this fight going up beyond?
When Wike was the minister,
Amechi was the governor.
Yes, he used the federal might. You understand, to get his nomination and, of course, to win that election. Now, Amechi is in the federal. His position, because Amechi was supposed to deliver Rivers State, and he never did.
He never did. It was like a makeup story.
But they needed to compensate him, because if Amechi was not compensated,
oh my God!
I know him very well. It's going to be another hell for the APC. But that is a party issue. But I think the bottom line at the end of this paper review is that INEC should come up with an insurance policy for hard work staff and even INEC staff.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Yemi Daniels, for coming. Of course, that's just a clip of what transpired. We saw soldiers, and even they arrested fake soldiers. Really?
You see all sorts.
Yeah, fake soldiers. And the militants, the kind of weapon in the hands of the militants, even the army does not have it. So
it's pathetic that many of us Nigerians just sit down and await this kind of opportunities to execute and exhibit violence. it's really annoying.
No, I think we have a damaged psyche.
Okay, the best, we need to just hope and wish for the best. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, when we come back after the break, we'll be looking at sexually transmitted diseases as it relates to family life. And this is a very serious issue. It's something we just hope you could also call it to be part of. Wufa, you have a package on this issue.
Yes.
Can you just give us a tip of the iceberg what the package I was actually looking at?
Well, the package talks about what sexually transmitted diseases are, the types of sexually transmitted diseases, gonorrhea, and the rest of it. I'm basically focused on the prevention, because if we're talking about sexually transmitted diseases, we should also educate people on how it could be prevented and how it could be avoided. So that's basically it.
Of course, every Tuesday we discuss health on AM Chat. We'll be right back after this time.